Hello, and I'm so glad that I can be with you here with Mental Health Month in May. And Soul Naturals is taking such a great part in doing this and focusing on how can we help improve mental health. And so I have a series of videos that I'm going to do this month. I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been in practice for over 20 years. Yeah. And um, I've seen a lot of clients, and I've been privileged to witness a lot of clients recover beautifully from a whole range of troubles. One of the things that has really made a huge difference in terms of my ability to help others at work, but also my ability to have good relationships at home and with my friends, is the skill that I'm going to teach you this month called validation. Validation, in my opinion, is probably the best skill you could ever have to learn to help with relationships. What you're doing is you're telling the other person with you that basically they're okay. Their experience is okay. Their feelings are okay. That they make sense, that it's something that you can tolerate instead of something that is going to break you. When you're communicating with people, there's kind of two parts of that communication. First of all, there's the content, what it is that the person's actually saying. And so it might be, I'm bringing in groceries from the car. That might be the content. And then there's the emotion behind it. It might be, I'm bringing in groceries from the car. And you're like, wow, you're really excited about that. Or it could be, I'm bringing in groceries from the car. And you might say, do you need help? Sounds like you're in pain. Bringing in groceries sounds tough. And so we listen for the emotion behind it. We don't always talk about it, but we always hear it. Our brain is actually really built to hear the emotion before the content. But for some reason, we have trained ourselves to kind of ignore the emotion and pay attention to the content. It might be that the emotion threatens us. It might be that we don't know how to fix things. We might want people to feel better. We don't know what to do. And some of the things behind that could be, or one of the things behind that rather, could be this sense that I can't tolerate your emotion. I don't know what to do with it. And so I'm going to ignore it. Validation gives you a method for what can you do with the other person's emotion. Not only does that help you, but it really helps that relationship because it gives you an opportunity to extend kind of a bridge of understanding and connection and acceptance and love to the other person. So I want you to learn how to do this, and I want you to really try to do it in your life and see how things change. So when someone gets you, when they really understand you, then what you're feeling is that they understand and accept and can be with you and your feelings. They get the feelings behind what it is that you're saying. And when you get those feelings, then the other person feels cared for, understood, appreciated, or at least like they're important for you. And this helps, of course, strengthen any relationship. So step one, to make it really simple, is identify as best as you can what the emotion is that you hear behind the content. And so with my example of groceries in the car, you could think, all right, so if I said, wow, I'm bringing groceries in from the car, you might think, maybe she's looking forward to something. Maybe she's like really wants dinner. That might be true. Or maybe somebody's coming up. I don't know. There's some reason why you're excited, and you identify that excitement. It might be obvious. It might be subtle. It might be, I'm bringing in groceries from the car. And then you might think, oh, it sounds like I'm supposed to do something about that. Like maybe what they're saying is they're resentful that I'm not helping or something like that. So it might be obvious. It might be subtle. What you can do is practice figuring out how to name emotions. So just developing a bigger vocabulary of your emotions is a huge step toward being able to be validating. So you can use this basic emotion wheel. You can find this anywhere online if you just Google emotion wheel, something like this, or there's a whole bunch of variations will pop up. And I will give you a little closer look here. So this is just the section of the wheel that deals with feelings that are in the anger family. So you can see there are a whole bunch of different feelings that are in the anger family, but they're not all anger per se. You could say, I feel really let down. Well, that kind of disappointment has an aspect of anger to it, but it's not nearly the same thing as I'm feeling furious, or I'm feeling distant or disrespected or numb, etc. All those things might be in the anger family, but it really helps for you to identify which one the person is feeling. The more specific you can be about that feeling, the more understood the person is. And if you do this for yourself, which I think is critical also, the more specific you can be with your own feelings, the more validated you feel, the more accepted, the more you can feel like, oh, yeah, that's actually it. That's what I'm feeling. And there's something very healing about naming the emotion. We know in the brain, when you name the emotion you're feeling, what actually lights up our problem solving areas of the brain. So it's very helpful for you to be able to name that emotion. And it just feels comforting. You'll see an example of this in a minute. And so if I think I'm bringing in the groceries and I'm indignant that I have to bring them in myself, that's really different than I'm frustrated even. There's enough of a difference so that if I could say, oh, you sound indignant, it seems like there's something that should have happened that wasn't happening. I'm going to connect a lot more with that than, oh, you're frustrated. I'm like, yeah, I'm frustrated, but that's not really it. It's indignant. Step 2, then what you do is you reflect that person's feelings to them. So you could say something like, I'm guessing you feel upset about this. You sound pretty indignant about it. If I were you, I would feel frustrated. Those sorts of things. I'm guessing you feel, if I were you, I would feel, wow, you must be really upset about this. Those are just little phrases you can use to start off. There are lots of ways you can say it, but those 3 are a good beginning. You want to listen really carefully to that person. If you're close to being accurate, in other words, if I say, you sound pretty excited about bringing in the groceries and what I'm actually feeling is indignant, I probably will tell you, no, I'm not really so excited. I'm mostly mad about it. And then you as the listener can have some cues or some clues, both, so that you can narrow down what the other person is feeling. As you continue to kind of narrow it down, there's like a back and forth that happens, and the person will feel more and more understood. So they might say, no, I'm not really excited. I'm kind of like, I don't know, I'm upset about it. And you can say, oh, you're upset. Yeah. Tell me you're upset. You're angry. You can listen to their voice and kind of get a sense. And then they can say, yeah, I'm angry, but there's more to it than that. I'm like, I feel like people should be helping me. And then you say, oh, like indignant. And they're like, oh, yes. Yeah, I feel indignant. Oh, and then there's this feeling of kind of like, I felt heard. I felt connected to, I felt like really loved, that you can sit there and listen to me and not tell me to solve my problem, or not tell me that I shouldn't feel that way, but just hear what I'm feeling. And so the more details you get, as you get those details, you just keep validating. You don't turn the validation into problem solving. You just let it be validation and end that there. You don't feel like you have to go on and fix anything. This is only about validation. And so a lot of times you have an urge to fix things and solve people's problems and say, well, if you shouldn't feel indignant, or people should help you. Let me fix it. That might be a little bit helpful, but it's not the same experience as feeling validated. So I have a video to show you. And in this video, I'm speaking with a friend of mine whose name is Orion. He's pretty fantastic. And he and I are going to talk about validation, and he's going to share his experience with validation, which I thought was just so useful. I think that you'll love it. So this is Orion, and he's going to tell you his story about how validation has helped him, and things about validation that you've discovered.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I was actually serving as a leader and I went to a softball game, and I was really excited to go like help the people there. But I had invited tons of people, was really excited to have some fun, and as I go, no one is there, and so we're literally about to go play this other team.
How disappointing! Oh my gosh.
Yeah, talk about disappointing. And so no one's there. It's just me and this other team. And then there's a couple girls that show up, and they came not to play, but everyone has to play. It's really awkward. And so I started feeling like no one supported me, that no one really was willing to love me enough to come and support me. And also that I had put so much towards them, and yet, like, how come I love them, but it felt like they weren't loving me back.
Right, of course. Yeah, I can see how that would be. Yeah.
And then to top it all off, I had to stay after, and there's another game after that I had to be an ump for, and I don't know anything about softball. And so I made a bad call. I didn't even know it was a call, and so one of the teams started yelling at me, and so just the feel of not being loved, but then on top of piling on
miserable.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, especially when you're trying to do your best, and then you're volunteering to ump, and then people get mad at you. What a rotten day.
I mean, I was trying with all my heart to help, and yet it seemed like every time that I tried to help during that time was unsuccessful.
Right. Right. And so how did you handle that in terms of using validation for yourself?
It actually wasn't until about 3 months later that I actually was willing to validate myself. And so those 3 months were torture for myself, because I said, I shouldn't be feeling this way.
Oh gosh. So you were spending all those months telling yourself you shouldn't feel the way you're feeling, and then still kind of beating yourself up for feeling unloved. And yeah. Oh,
I communicated to myself that the reason why no one showed up was because I didn't try hard enough. So it told me was that I felt like I tried as much as I could, but it wasn't enough. And so therefore, no matter what I do, I will not be successful in helping people.
Oh my gosh. And that's really important to you, helping people.
That is so
that was like
a thing,
kind of a mini life crisis right there.
So it actually, 3 months later, I was crying in bed. It had been a every night thing. And I started thinking about why I was feeling the way I was, and I came to terms with it's okay that no one came, and I understood why I felt hurt and painful, especially with people yelling at me, but it made sense why I felt that way, and when I did that,
so you said my feelings make sense instead of I shouldn't feel this way. My feelings make sense. And the moment you did that,
all gone. And I've been changed ever since.
Wow. That's huge.
Yeah.
What an awesome story.
Thank you.
Wow. And so, I'm looking at a story that you also told, and I'm connecting it. This is kind of interesting because you recently told me a little story about how you had planned another activity, the car wash, a couple months ago or so.
Yeah.
You had this car wash planned, and you invited all these people, and nobody showed up. And you said that was really hard, and you kind of started feeling like people didn't love you.
Well, the nice thing for this situation was like the first couple minutes, no one showed up. I had like one other person there, and I was like, okay. I walked through some self-validation. I was like, it's okay. It's a car wash. It was 50 degrees, so it wasn't very well planned. But then as I validated it and I said, that's okay, because I'll wash as many cars as needed, people started showing up.
Yeah. Well, I find it interesting that you had that same thought pop up of I'm not loved. Like this is a thought that is just kind of tormenting you, and you get an opportunity over and over to kind of look at that thought and say, it's not a rational thought. But more importantly, what you're saying to yourself is, instead of, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, it's not a rational thought, is I get it why I would feel this way. Of course I feel this way. And then you move on. You're like, okay, and what I'm going to do now is wash as many cars as I can.
Yeah, and it almost started validating other people. Like now when I see people, I think, oh my gosh, I wonder if they're feeling the same way. And so that makes me want to go support them more. And when they're feeling down, I feel like I know what it feels like to have no one show up. And so if I'm willing to show up and I'm the only person, that's enough. And I feel like I can help them at least in the small degree I can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find ways to validate their feelings. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about that.
Those 3 months actually are the crux of most of my experience with feeling depressed. Now, I wouldn't say it was clinical depression, but it was most definitely feeling depressed and anxious and all the other negative emotions attached to that.
Yeah.
And so I can look back now when I'm talking to people, and when they say, I felt alone, I felt like no one was with me, which is honestly one of the things I hear the most, I can say, that sucks. That is a very hard emotion. I understand why you feel that way, and I understand that it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say, like, oh, someone else is like me. And then
right. And so what I'm noticing you're not doing is giving them advice.
No.
Right?
I don't have any advice.
But that's so powerful to be able to just be with their emotion and sit with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if we're going to practice this and you're going to help me demonstrate,
mm-hmm.
And you're going to be validating, I could say something like, so my daughter is living with your mom right now.
Is, yeah.
Like, how fun is that?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just really touched by what I hear from how, like, I think yesterday your mom had a big family dinner.
Probably Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah. And my daughter was supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I just loved feeling like she was important and included and loved by your family. That just does a lot for me.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me feel so grateful and like, I just love that my daughter's loved by your family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially because you love her so much, and so you're worried about her going somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then it makes sense why you feel the joy and excitement for her to feel love somewhere else in a different place.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah. Great. So this is your last week of school in not forever, but for your undergraduate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. That's got to be a mixture of exciting and a little weird.
Yeah. A little weird's the best word for it.
Yeah. So I'm going to pause you right here and just say something. So when I don't know exactly what Orion is feeling, I can say something that's a little exploratory, like a little weird, because I'm sure that some of it is exciting, but I'm sure that some of it also is a little, and I don't know if he's anxious. I don't know if he's frustrated or like kind of sad to be. I don't know what it is. And so I'm going to float this word weird out there, and then he can sort of, like you saw, he kind of grabbed onto me. He said, yeah, weird. Yeah, weird is a good word. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm going to wait for him to kind of expand on that. So if you pretend I didn't have this little like input here, we'll just time out. Yeah, just go back to the beginning. Mm-hmm. So it's a little weird, huh?
Mm-hmm. It's I've been going to schools. I haven't really had a break from school. I mean, high school and then basically straight into college. And this will be my first time to take a break.
Yeah.
And so little weird is the best word for it. I'm scared for progressing, but at the same time, I'm so excited to be in this new adventure.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think I think you'll like it. I think it'll be fun.
Mm-hmm.
You won't have to have those. There's something always around the corner that you have to do.
Yeah. I get to choose what I want to do now, and I can study those things that I'm interested in, even though a lot of the classes I take I'm interested in as well.
Right.
But I won't have a specific agenda. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Any final words you want to say about validation?
The biggest thing about validation for me is that it has power. Mm-hmm. I think in that moment that I self-validated, it has changed my life. And now, for example, about a year ago, breakups are always hard. And so I had a breakup, and of course you feel those emotions of like separation, fear, disappointment, sadness. And it was leading me towards my old self. But when I started to realize and validate my own emotions, that it makes sense that I feel this way, I felt powerful and enabled to progress despite feeling those things. Mm-hmm. They didn't vanish immediately, but it really did give me power. So I think of validation now as power, especially when you self-validate, but also when you validate others. It enables them to be able to overcome those emotions, or rather embrace those emotions and use them.
So it's kind of like you can see yourself as separate from your emotion. When you say, of course, my emotion makes sense, then you can be a person independent of the emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. I hope this helped.
Okay. Orion's great, isn't he? Last couple thoughts. If you know something about the person, like for example, when Orion was telling me about the baseball story, I knew that I already knew about the car wash story. And so I was able to add that in to the discussion and make that connection across time. You know, the baseball thing was a few years ago. The car wash thing was just a couple months ago. And that would add more depth to explaining their feeling. Helping them in that way helps people see more and more how their feelings make sense. And then again, they can feel more appreciated, loved, more accepted. What is not validation is reassurance or compliments or explaining or encouragement. Sometimes these can be very nice things. I'm not saying don't do them. I'm just saying don't call them validation. They're different from validation. And so if you set out to practice validation, I would strongly recommend sticking to only validation and leaving these other things out for another time. Validation gives you a real opportunity for your personal growth. You get to learn how to listen instead of how to explain. This creates a lot of patience in you, learning how to just listen and sit there with someone else's frustration instead of you jumping in with an explanation. A lot of times an explanation is just a way of shutting people's feelings down, telling them, stop feeling this way. It's all fine. It's an explanation. Or learning to allow yourself to express feelings despite being uncomfortable. Learning to do that, you can do that through validation. And that other feelings are usually about them. They're not about you. They're having their feelings. Even if the situation involves you, you have to see that most of the time, or maybe all of the time, those feelings have nothing to do with you. They're about that person. You can accept those feelings without approving of those feelings. And so that just plain acceptance without necessarily having to approve gives you a lot of freedom to really love people. And that's really what we're talking about. Validate, love. Here's to your mental health. Take care.